On the 9th of November 1938, the Nazi state unleashed a wave of destruction on Jews living in Germany, Austria, and parts of Czechoslovakia newly annexed. Thousands of businesses and synagogues were destroyed and looted, people attacked and murdered in the streets, and around 30,000 men rounded up and arrested in a state-sponsored and coordinated pogrom. Kristallnacht, or Night of Broken Glass, is seen as a major event in the run-up to the Holocaust, a sign of the violence to come. In today's video, we will cover the events leading up to Kristallnacht, just what happened, and what it meant for those affected. By 1933, the Nazis under Chancellor Adolf Hitler had achieved success in garnering power and political legitimacy. Over the next few years, the Nazi state would begin the process of stripping rights from Jews and other non-Aryans. In April of 1933, Jews and those who held different political views were banned from the civil service, whilst in September of 1933, non-Aryan lawyers were disbarred from practicing, and in October, Jews were banned from being journalists. All of these measures were passed whilst Hitler was Chancellor, and whilst President Hindenburg was still alive. But in August of 1934, Hindenburg died, and Hitler abolished the position of president. Instead, he incorporated the role into his own, the newly named Führer of Germany, the absolute dictator with no legal or constitutional limits to his authority. In September of 1935, the infamous Nuremberg laws were passed, otherwise known as the Nuremberg race laws. These laws codified Nazi racial beliefs, with anti-Semitism as a key component. The Nazis had long sought to impose a legal definition of Jews based on not religious association, but a racial basis. A large number of German Jews did not adhere to traditions, having integrated into German society for generations. Many Jews married Christians, practiced Christian holidays whilst not practicing Jewish holidays, with some even converting to Christianity. The Reich citizenship law and subsequent editions decreed that only people of German or kindred blood could obtain German citizenship. A person's family tree was looked at to determine their race. Those with 3 or more grandparents born into the Jewish religious community were designated as Jews by law. The grandparents' racial status was deemed to pass to their children and grandchildren. This meant that Jews were not eligible or designated as citizens, rather, they were subjects of the Nazi state. For those who had 1 or 2 Jewish grandparents, a separate distinction was made, calling such people Mischlinge, or mixed race. In order to avoid further mixing of Aryan and Jews, the Nazis also banned marriages between the two groups and made relations illegal. The laws were passed in the heinously named Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honour. Citizens were encouraged to report any such activity to the police, with propaganda espousing the damage it could cause, notably a pollution of the Aryan race. Soon enough, black people and Roma were incorporated into the definitions of the Nuremberg race laws. The punishment for breaking such laws often meant hard labour in the state's ever-growing network of concentration camps. All the while, it became ever more normal to exclude Jews from public life. Schools were capped with how many Jewish students they would accept. Jewish actors were prohibited from stage and screen, and the work of Jewish academics was completely disregarded. The Nazi state also began the process of Aryanization, whereby Jewish-owned businesses would be transferred to Germans. Such transactions were not voluntary and resulted in businesses being sold at far below the market price. The veneer of legality meant little to those robbed of their livelihoods. In July of 1938, in the face of the ever-increasing erosion of the rights of the Jews in Germany, the Avian Conference was held to address the issues of Jews fleeing the Nazi territory. 32 countries attended, with the Soviet Union as noted as not attending. By 1938, around 450,000 of the 900,000 German Jews had either fled or had been expelled from Germany. In large part, the conference failed to address the needs of the thousands of Jewish refugees. Then followed in August of 1938 the law on the alteration of family and personal names. This decreed that those Jews with Christian or traditionally non-Jewish surnames amend their names to include Israel for men or Sarah for women. In addition, a large J was stamped on all Jewish passports, as to further mark them as separate from the Aryan population. Existing passports were then invalidated, meaning only those with the J stamped were available. Around this time, Poland issued a decree that stripped Polish Jews who had lived abroad for more than 5 years of their Polish citizenship. This was to disenfranchise Polish Jews and keep 20,000 Austrian Jews with Polish citizenship from fleeing to Poland. In response, the Gestapo rounded up 17,000 Polish Jews living in Germany and forced them to the Polish border. Under threat of violence and kept in inhumane conditions, thousands existed in limbo, unable to cross into Poland and detained by the Nazis. Among those deported were the Grinspan family. When their son Herschel learned of the fate of his parents, he was enraged. At the time, Herschel was living in Paris with some relatives, though was living there illegally and was unable to work. He took what money he had and purchased a revolver and some bullets, and a farewell postcard. It is thought that Herschel's target was Johann von Welschek, the German ambassador to France. On the 7th of November, the 17-year-old Herschel made his way to the German embassy in Paris, but unwittingly walked past von Welschek as he left for a morning walk. Herschel claimed that he was a German citizen and that he was in possession of some incredibly important secret documents. He therefore needed to speak to someone of a high standing, as only they could be in receipt of such documents. He even claimed that he was a spy. The receptionist then directed Herschel to Ernst von Rath, a junior embassy official. Upon entering von Rath's office, Herschel drew his revolver and shouted, "You're a filthy Bosch. In the name of 12,000 persecuted Jews, here is the document," and shot him 5 times in the abdomen. Von Rath's death 2 days later on the 9th of November was just what the Nazis needed. This date just so happened to be the anniversary of the failed Munich Putsch of 1923, where the Nazis failed to take power by force. Minister of Foreign Affairs von Ribbentrop declared the shooting as an attack by Jews on the German people. He is quoted as saying, "We understand the challenge, and we accept it." Joseph Goebbels gave a speech commemorating the putsch to the Old Guard and the leading Nazis around the country, where he explained that if the German people wanted to take out their anger on the Jews in Germany, this would be understandable, and in many ways, expected. It was decided that such attacks would not be openly organized by the state, as Goebbels wrote in his diary. In the afternoon, the death of the German diplomat von Rath is announced. That's good. I briefed Hitler on the affair. He decided to allow the demonstrations to go on and withdraw the police. The Jews should feel the people's fury. I issued appropriate instructions to the police and party. Then I gave a brief speech on the subject to the party's leadership. Thunderous applause. Everyone dashed to the telephone. Now the people will act. Those who dashed to the telephone were regional leaders who issued their offices to start the process of retribution against Jews in Germany, Austria, and newly annexed Czechoslovakia. It was clear to them that Goebbels had ordered a pogrom to be carried out. Goebbels even comments in his diary that there were some who hesitated to organize their men to action, calling these people wimps and indicating his desire for violence. Violence began to erupt during the late evening and early morning hours of November the 9th to the 10th. Brown-shirt thugs and Hitler Youth groups, mainly wearing civilian clothing, took to the streets and smashed up Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues. The goal was to portray the attacks as a genuine public response, yet the truth is that it was largely state-organized. That is not to say that plenty of German citizens did not watch or take part. There are plenty of accounts and photographs of crowds watching the carnage, many cheering or even clapping in encouragement. In particular, the head of the security service, Reinhard Heydrich, played a key role in coordinating and organizing the violence. He limited violence against foreigners, prohibited the targeting of non-Jewish people and property, and ordered the seizure of all records held in synagogues as to obtain as much information on the Jewish population. As Jewish property burned, the fire service was stopped from intervening, told only to put out the fires that managed to spread to Aryan property nearby. Jewish cemeteries were desecrated, shops were looted, and people were subjected to assault, including SA. It is thought that around 90 people were murdered on the night, though this figure is likely higher, and certainly doesn't include those who took their own lives following the trauma inflicted. In all, 7,000 businesses were destroyed, thousands of homes were ransacked, and 250 synagogues were burned to the ground. Meanwhile, following Hitler's orders, the police and Gestapo began the roundup of around 30,000 young Jewish men. This marked the first time that the Nazi state would detain Jews on a huge scale. Most ended up in Dachau, Sachsenhausen, or Buchenwald concentration camps, where hundreds died due to the brutal treatment inflicted upon them. Release from the camps was on the condition that they started the process of emigrating from Germany, leaving what possessions and property they might hold in the hands of the Nazis. This increase in the Aryanization process went hand in hand with the further rules against Jews in public life, notably the removal of Jews being able to hold driving licenses, to be able to teach in German schools, and more Jewish children being removed from schools. Not only was the Night of Broken Glass a violent repression of Jews, but also saw a huge financial imposition upon the Jewish community. After their businesses and properties were destroyed, insurance claims were eventually agreed to be paid out, but the payouts were confiscated by the Nazi state. It was held that the Jews alone were responsible for the damage caused that night, and so they were collectively fined 1 billion Reichsmarks. Money from the insurance companies was instead directed to the Nazi government to cover the damage to the German nation. Whilst many countries outright denounced Kristallnacht, many offered little help to those eager to flee Nazi Germany. For example, President Roosevelt of the United States stated that he could not believe that such actions were possible in the 20th century, but went on to say that he would not remove the quota system for immigration to allow more German Jews entry. However, those German Jews with visas that were to expire were granted indefinite leave to remain in the United States. Nevertheless, some 115,000 Jews left Germany following Kristallnacht. As for the fate of the assassin, Herschel was arrested by the French authorities, who refused to hand him over to Nazi Germany. In 1940, with the German army pressing to Paris, the SS had ordered to obtain Herschel and bring him to Germany to face punishment. Once captured, he would spend time in concentration camps, held as a special prisoner, with the likes of the former Austrian Chancellor, Kurt Schuschnigg. Despite Goebbels' plan for a show trial, he faced resistance from the legal system. They rightly pointed out that Herschel was not a German citizen, he was a minor and had committed crime outside of German jurisdiction. In addition, Herschel sought to paint the shooting as a lover's quarrel between himself and von Rath, which, whilst a fabrication, did leave the Nazis with concern whether or not von Rath was a homosexual. Without Hitler's express go-ahead, there would be no trial, leaving Herschel's fate unknown. It is widely accepted that he died during the war, though rumours did arise that he survived. However, there is little evidence to suggest this, and in all likelihood met his end in the concentration camps, one of the millions killed by the Nazi state. In November of 2022, new photographs emerged showing further evidence of the role played by the brown shirts and the Nazi state in the violence. What's more, in Goebbels' own diary, he comments on how the events of Kristallnacht were not random acts of violence carried out by ordinary German citizens, and in fact, that such mob mentality was not desired. He states, "I draft an executive order on the conclusion of the actions. It is just enough by now. If we let this go on, then there is a danger that the mob will appear. This is quite clearly pointing to a controlled, deliberate state-led action, with Goebbels commenting on the danger of the widespread involvement of ordinary German citizens. Kristallnacht is an important event and was used as a way to send a warning to Jews who might think about attacking the Nazi state, and as a deliberate ramping up of actions against Jews in Nazi territory. In a few short years, the Nazis commenced their final solution to the Jewish question, the Holocaust of 6 million Jews. Whilst the destination is horrific, it is important to remember that the steps that led to the gas chambers were small and incremental. From the banning of Jews in the civil service, it took 9 years to reach the decision to commence the Holocaust.